Welcome back, MTG Joe here. Today we're going to be looking at the weekly meta breakdown for the best decks in Timeless Best of 1. If you're looking for Best of 3, other formats, take a look at the playlist, try to cover each week. I got some comments whether or not I was going to cover Historic. A couple comments on that is most people have moved over to Timeless, it seems, in all honesty. From the decks that are remaining, like I took a look at Best of 1, I was going to record it actually instead of this video, just in terms of release schedule. There's 4 decks. It's been like the same 4 decks for months on months on months. It's Wizards, it's Mono Green Devotions, it's Ninjas, and it's overwhelmingly amount of Leyline Geist decks. Not much creativity or just focus being shared there. I will probably do a conjoined video in the next little bit covering just across the format, but there's no point. Like, you could just watch any of the other videos. It's the same deck list, to be honest. I just don't want to put out content that's not really, changing in any way. I've taken some breaks at time at Standard as well when it's been like the same 3 decks as we've had in the past. But in any case, the focus of this video is Timeless. And in case you didn't see, if you don't follow Fire Shoes on Twitter, great follow. It looks like we are going to get a Timeless metagame challenge February 2nd through the 6th. So this is over the weekend, best of 3. You could win a whole bunch of packs, which is really exciting. They're really fun. It's like 2,000 gold to enter, and you can win up to 30 packs on each run. So I will be, for gameplay, I will focus on best of 3 leading up to that. We've done pretty much most of the best of 1 decks, so we'll look at best of 3 now, do some gameplay demos of those as well, and test out things leading up to that metagame challenge. So we are going to, as always, get the data from UntappedGG, also going to be pulling some community decks. As I've mentioned in previous notes with the Timeless format, for whatever reason, Untapped, I raised a ticket with them, they're looking into it. The mono green Field of the Dead decks aren't being pulled into the data set, so we aren't going to see mono green in any of these stats. I'll pull up a deck list as an example that could be referenced as well. So Untapped, links in the video description if you want to use Untapped. Let them know I sent you, and then I'll paste all these deck lists and timestamp them. We're going to start off with looking at the popularity of the decks, just in terms of the volumes of games, then we'll look at the corresponding win rates as well. As always, because Timeless has only been like a month and a half, populations aren't going to be massive. We're only looking at a week's worth of data. What we really want to focus on here is the win rates here are going to be up and down week over week. There might be some variance because it's a smaller sample size. What we want to focus on is where things are changing, some of the cards, what's being tested out new. If we have comparative decks, say there's 2 Jund mid-range decks. Well, is one 5% higher win rate? What cards are differing in that? It's really about an exploratory stage of this format. Like the kind of core concepts are there in terms of the decks themselves as kind of fundamental decks. It's more of the flex spots, what's changing, stuff of that nature, and then we'll try to find as much as possible each week new decks that are popping up. So popularity of the day, we have mono black control. So this is usually Dark Ritual Necro. The mono black control versions usually go into Sheoldred one ring, not wing. More interactive, but turn 1 Necro, very, very powerful. There's also the Necro Storm decks that see various amounts of play. Mono Black Control not having a great day, at least. We have Rakdos Burn, and then Mono Red Burn, some variants. This is the deck I'm on right now and having really good success with. Rakdos Midrange, usually either a Luris version or a one-ring version. With coming into the stats is also the Rakdos Breach deck at times. So kind of worth noting that it sometimes gets amalgamated into this mid-range pool. The Grixis Shadow is kind of an amalgamated. I've seen Grixis Tainted Pact also get included here. So something to keep in mind. So pretty much a lot of the meta is like Necro decks, Rakdos Burn. We see, at least personally, I run into a lot of Field of the Dead, and then various like Red Black X kind of mid-range style decks. We have Dimir Control, which is the Luris deck. And this one's actually got a crab. Is this a mill deck? Now I'm curious. I see where are you, deck? We got one. Who's playing? Who is playing? Okay, so they just put the wrong graphic, but I saw the little crab and I thought, oh, is someone playing mill? Dimir Control, you'll probably see some numbers. Missman did really well in the Creator Clash tournament with it. Missman's very good at the deck. It's very hard to operate. There's very, very little room for errors in the deck. So something to keep in mind there. And then Jund midrange is making about 2%. If we look kind of the trends, the Rakdos Burn decks fallen off a bit, and we see an increase in the mono black control decks. Otherwise, kind of ebbs and flows. We saw Dimir Dredge kind of peak up and it's fallen down. The Dredge decks are also fairly popular, whether it be the Dimir or the Grixis versions. So we'll look at the stats itself. So January 4th through the 11th, we got 7 days, 10,000 games played, 50 match cap. Again, if we went to the higher counts, like we could look at 200, it's basically Dimir Dredge and then the Rakdos Burn. But if we're looking at the 50 count, we go to the highest win rate, which is Rakdos Breach, 71.4%. So this version, we've seen a few of them with the, sorry, I'm looking Diamond and Mythic rank, just to mention. The Ragavans, this one's more all in on the combo. So we have Shambling Ghast, which is pretty decent at either just holding back your opponent's Bowmasters. It makes attacking a little awkward at times. And it could ramp you up, which is useful. Stitcher Supplier to fill your graveyard. With the 2 cheaper 1-drops, you're playing Corrupted Conviction, which is like the new Village Rites. Same idea, you can play this or Village Rites. As card draw, DRC to help fill your graveyard. You have the DRC Bauble package. This version is also on full 4 of Wishclaw Talisman to help you find your combo pieces. In addition to Diabolic Intent and Demonic Tutor. Full 4 of Underworld Breach. Kind of the core is you fill your graveyard. Then you cast Breach, chain together a bunch of Dark Rituals. With the Dark Rituals, you're able to put cards into your graveyard with Dragon Rage Chandler. You're also able with, like, you could Dark Ritual, cast the Stitcher Supplier, it mills the cards, and then you could, like, Corrupted Conviction to then get more cards into your hand or mill your graveyard. So there's a lot of kind of utility in that sense. Chain it together a few times, and then use one of the tutors to find Tendrils of Agony to kill your opponent. Version's also on the full Phyrexian Tower package, just to kind of take advantage. This is another way to sack the Stitcher Supplier, so you can get basically free Storm while also trying to potentially mill over your Tendrils of Agony. Luris Companion, that also buys you another kind of go around with the Breach. We then go to Dimir Dredge, so 63.7. Most of the decks now seem to be on the Brainstorm version of the deck. We've seen versions upwards of 4 Bone Shards. I've played the Merfolk in here too, the Adventure Merfolk that mills you. But basically the core of this deck is you're trying to self-mill, putting cards from the top of your deck into the graveyard. Otherworldly Gaze, Stitcher Supplier, Brainstorm helps you kind of reset. And then you have big mills with like Glimpse the Unthinkable. Silver Smoke Ghoul comes back if you gain 3 life from the free cast Creeping Chill. Wonder is a lot easier to enable with the fetch line since you can always kind of fetch for an island. This deck can play around Blood Moon pretty well too. Narcomoeba is free to come into play. Bloodghast keeps coming back whenever you play a land. And then Prize Amalgam comes back repeatedly. So this deck can kind of outpace Burn at times. It's also really good against the control decks, just because your creatures dying don't really have a huge impact. They just keep coming back. The Field of the Dead matchup could be a little tough at times, in part because they can go wide, so you really need to hit your Wonder. The one problem is they oftentimes can tutor for Bazooka Bog, which could then disrupt your ability to get flying. There is a Grixis version going around that plays Faithless Looting. That one's a little bit softer to Bowmaster than this version here. As well, that version plays no basics. It plays a bunch of fetches, shocks, and mana confluence. So you deal a lot more damage to yourself with your lands, as well as the fact that Burn is very omnipresent. So it kind of hurts you that way. As a Burn player, I love to see the Grixis version because I know they're doing 5 to 7 damage at minimum to themselves in terms of their mana base. Speaking of Burn, we have the mono red version, and I think this one was from MTG Goldfish. This is more of a budget deck. So if you're looking to get into the format, this one's relatively cheap, all things considered. Okay, I'll say relatively. This one's actually not there now that I look at the amount of rares. But 4 mythics in here, and then 8, 12, 8, 16, 18, 18. So 22 all in total. Not terrible. And then the fetches are very useful anyways in terms of other decks. If you're already crafting the fetches, depending on what you have, I'll show you my Rakdos version. I think the Rakdos version is better, all things considered. But this version here, just playing a lot of Burn, Play with Fire, Lightning Bolts, Kumanos, Dragon Rage Chandler, Baubles, very powerful here. You have your Ragavans for card advantage. I actually think full 4 of Ragavans too much for the burn deck. In a field with so much Bowmaster and just like Dredge and incidental creatures, it's often a little bit difficult. It's kind of helped with the fact you have a lot of burn to get rid of your opponent's creatures. So if you play a little bit more controlling, it's not bad. I do play a couple copies, but I don't play this full set in my version. I play 2. We have Static Discharge in this version, the scalable damage spell, Eidolon of the Great Revels, that kind of pings your opponent that way there. So really what you want to try to do is get your opponent, break parity, and then have it so that if they don't answer Eidolon, it kills them right away. Eidolon also being an enchantment helps the creature type for Delirium with this. Light up the stage and then skewer the critics. Now, the version I'm running, I am 14.4 tracked. I play this a bunch on my iPad as well. I'm up in Diamond now with this, but my version, Rakdos with Allura's Companion, you get Bump in the Night for 1 mana. The one change, so I was running 2 Kumanos to skewer the critics. The next version I'm going to cut the 2 skewers, cut the 2 Kumanos, and just play 4 Play with Fires. The 2 Ragavans in here also help. The card that I think a lot of decks aren't playing is Searing Blood. This card's been very, very good and often can win me matches. At times, you have to decide between turning your burn to either creatures or to the face. This accomplishes both of that. And it helps especially with Eidolon, where you could control their board and then also deal damage to their face in terms of kind of pushing through. The one soft spot is on the draw. You are a little weak to turn 1 pressure because you're only relying on Lightning Bolt. So that's where I want to play with Fires. All things considered, like the skewer is a little slow, and oftentimes you want to play your spells either pre or during combat to trigger prowess. So that's another reason why I want to kind of have more instant speed. Bowmaster's in here as well, helps with the card draw. And then I'm playing 1 Sunbaked Canyon. You can play any of the Horizon lands, just the mark card draw in the mana base. So then I have a gameplay video if you're interested in that one. We go then to 5-color Domain Zoo, 59.7%. And this version here, kind of cards that we've seen this week that they're trying out is Hooting Mandrills. Delve card gets around Fatal Push, could be as cheap as a 1-mana 4/4 Trampler. And this is another card that plays nicely with Stubborn Denial, just to be a cheap enabler. You're often fetching so much that you can reduce the cost down to have a potentially 1-mana 4/4 that can then easily be protected. This version is also on the Deathrite Shamans, which I really like, the Ragavans and Wild Nacatls, as well as Lightning Bolts and Tribal Flames as removal. Single copy of Once Upon a Time, which I think is the correct amount, and then Territorial Kavu, Nashiba Brawler, Bowmaster split, and then 1 of Planeswalkers in both Oko and Minsc and Boo for kind of the grindier advantages, as well as the Leyline Bindings. This version here, no Steam Vent, no Stomping Ground. I would say if you're gonna play a basic, I would probably, it's a little interesting. I think if you're playing a basic, you play white because it lets you get Leyline Binding. The flip side, actually, green might be reasonable because you can play Deathrite in this version. You could play Wild Nacatl. You could still play your Territorial Kavu as well as Minsc. So it's a little bit like, what do you want to hedge against? I haven't been seeing as much Blood Moon lately, so the Forest is probably the safer bet. I've seen some versions play 1 of each, a Plains and a Forest, but oftentimes a Plains on its own is terrible outside of the Leyline Binding turn. Giganta Companion in this version. Then go to Sneak Attack. So this is, they're calling it 5-color Sneak Attack, but it's really Rakdos. This one was one of the few decks that bet my Rakdos deck because they pulled off the double kind of cast. So one card this deck's playing is Chalice of the Void, which is quite the bummer for some decks. And the thing with Chalice, normally Chalice, you're going to play on 1. You could play on 0 in some cases, but most of the decks, cutting them off 1 mana is pretty impactful. So you could actually Dark Ritual Chalice on 1 and then kind of lock them out there of a lot of their 1-drop plays. Thoughtseize, Fatal Push, Ragavans, a lot of Burn is that 1 mana that we saw. So it's a good way to kind of lock them out that way. Demonic Tutor to find your combo pieces. But the core of the deck, you're going to try to get out this Sneak Attack and then cheat into play either Traxa or World Spineworm. And then when they sack, like the World Spineworm shuffles back into your library and you get 3 5/5s behind. Troll of Khazad-dûm is a cool card because it can be a line drop early and then late game you can cheat it into play as well, which is a nice threat, and it's pseudo unblockable, which is cool. You have the One Rings, you have Shieldra to kind of refill, and then Fable, Blood Moon, all kind of included in that package, which is kind of a sweet version. I wouldn't mind demoing this, but I am so short of wild cards. I need 5 of these, and I'm currently at 0, so times are tough out here. Notably no companion with this because of the color coordination. So then we are going to go to a couple community decks. This one is a Blue-Red Creativity 40 and 27 by, I'm going to say, Twitter bot user E6582. But in any case, there's a couple of versions going around. I've seen some Jeskai versions. I've seen some 4-color versions. And this one is a straight blue-red. So kind of the core of the deck is leveraging Indomitable Creativity to cheat into play Sarah's Emissaries and just win that way there. Oftentimes you can name creature that locks out a lot of decks like Dredge. You can name instant, sorcery, whatever it may be, get protection. You transform either Fable the Mirror Breaker ticket tokens, Hard Evidence tokens. This gives you 2, Strike It Rich, all ways to kind of give you tokens that way there. This version also has the ability to maul into Leyline of Sanctity to kind of protect your combo. Dwarven Mine with all the mountains also can make a creature. Now notably, Dwarven Mine is a mountain, so you can actually fetch for it at your opponent's end step, untap, and then combo them that way to get around sorcery speed removal. And then you have Expressive Iteration for card advantage, you have Brainstorms, Unholy Heat, Lightning Bolt, and Counterspell all mixed into there. Just showing a version of Mono Green Titan. So this one was from the Creator Clash, but you can also, they're pretty much very similar. This is a best 3 list. The best of 1 is pretty much the same. The kind of flex spot here, a lot of the lists I've seen, instead of Golos, they're playing Titan of Industry. I think that's a better card in case you do run into Blood Moon. It just is a more flexible card, gaining you life, blowing up artifacts, enchantments like Leyline Binding, blowing up Blood Moon, anything of that nature is a lot more useful than the Golos, I think, in these lists. But the core of the deck, you're using both a Boreal Grazer, Kami of Bamboo Groves to put lands into play earlier. Fierce Empath finds you Titan. You can also natural order any of those cheap creatures into Titan or Titan of Industry and start getting lands. Spelunking makes your lands come into play untapped. The kind of combo is using Hammer Battlement with the Stomping Grounds, which is... Where are you, Stomping Grounds? Stomping Grounds. And then that lets you get your Titan Haste. There's also kind of some cool lines with Sunken Citadel. It can activate the mana ability. So if you have a Sunken Citadel on 2 or 3, and then you have the Castle. I hate looking at these mana bases. Where is Castle Garenbrig? Castle Garenbrig. So you can basically pay 3 mana with this, and it kind of gets you ahead there. So the Citadel pays the 2, and then actually, so you need 4 lands. But if you kind of ramp up ahead, it basically lets you cheat ahead an extra land to get your Titan into play. The big thing is getting to 6 mana. World Tree in here fixes your mana for any color, which lets you then also enable the Hammer Battlement. Gate to Monoborn can be fetched, and it's a seed card for value. Blast Zones, Bajuka Bogs, Cavern for Encounterable. So there's a lot of utility lands that can be included in this deck. And then last deck is Timeless Storm. So there's a few different variants of this. I featured one in a video as well. I know Drafts Gone Bad Invested 3 on YouTube is having a lot of success with this variant. But the core of the deck is Necro Storm. So Dark Ritual into Necropotence turn 1. So you're going to aggressively mulligan to that and then draw a whole bunch of cards. You're using things like the Mishra's Bauble for free storm. Springleaf Drum tapping creatures also helps you get ahead. So Ornithopter's free to cast, Greedy Freebooter. That helps you both fix your mana for casting things like Weather the Storm or the Underworld Breach for alternate combo. And you kind of go from there. You also have Leylines of Sanctity, protect you against burn and discard, and then later can be sacked to Beseech the Mirror. There is lines where if you have enough tokens or like enchantments or stuff, basically bargain fodder, you can chain together Beseech the Mirrors. So you Beseech and then for Beseech and then Beseech for Beseech, Beseech for Beseech, and then you get Tendrils and then you drain your opponent out that way there. The mana base, Blooming Marshes, Blackleaf Cliffs, Phyrexian Tower, Swamps. Most lists don't play the cliffs. I found, so in my version, I was building it a little bit more for best of one. So I actually cut the ley lines and went just full Weather the Storm and then full Tormod's Crypt. Just increase the number of 0 drops, playing Storm that way there. But I would say you probably don't necessarily need the black mana, and at times if it comes to play untapped and 4, it also makes you more susceptible to Blood Moon, where normally you're not as impacted by the Blood Moon in the deck. There's a sideboard here as well, if you're interested in trying that out. That's it for the week. Let me know what you think, and we'll catch you next time. Thanks for watching.